Hi, welcome to my clarity after Scientology. This is my second video, and this is going to be entitled Why I Got into Scientology and Why I Left Scientology. So we'll start with why I got into Scientology. I believe I said in the first video that my mom got into Scientology it was about 1987. A friend of hers in Rochester, New York was playing some tapes from her, or for her, to listen to, and she fell in love with LRH and fell in love with what he had to say. And she said that in later years, when she explained this to me, that he had a lot to say to her personally. So she went up to the Church of Scientology in Buffalo, which is about a 60-mile drive from Rochester, New York. And she, like my mom does with everything, jumped in head over heels and got into it and ended up joining staff, went out to Clearwater, Florida, the Flag Land Base, and did her auditor training, became a Class 4 auditor, came back. I think I said in the video before, she also ended up becoming the executive director. This was all very hard because I was about 16, 17 years old when it happened. My sister was 4 years younger than me, so it was a little weird that our mom just kind of got up and left and joined a cult as it was being presented to us by my father and my stepmother. They were correct in a sense. So in 1991, I would have been in my second year of college, and my mom had asked me how I was doing in school, and it wasn't going all that well. So she's like, look, I know how you feel about with the church and how things have gone over the last couple of years, but why don't you come in? There's a course called the Basic Study Manual. Why don't you come in and do that? And take it from there. You're not obligated to do anything else. I'll cover the cost for you. So I came in, I did the Basic Study Manual. I lived 65, 70 miles away at the time, so getting there all the time to do the course was not easy, but I did the course. I learned a lot, actually. I was really quite surprised. I actually learned about how to study, and that's what the Basic Study Manual is. It's kind of an introductory course on how to study, learning about the 3 barriers to study. Obviously, very briefly, you have misunderstood words that stop someone's comprehension of what they're reading if they don't understand the words they are studying with. You have what's called the lack of mass, meaning you're studying about an engine, but you don't have an engine in front of you, so you can't use all theory. You need to have actually something physically in front of you to understand better what you're studying about. And then you have too steep a gradient, meaning, I guess the best thing would be is taking a first aid course and then expecting to understand how to do heart surgery on somebody. It's a much higher gradient than what where your training is at that time. So that helped, and I really actually felt I could learn. And I got to admit that learning was a bit of a room for me, because I'd always been told I was really smart, and yet I could never handle going to school. In fact, when I was in 6th grade, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, it's 6 more years left of this and then I'm free. But then I got older, and then you have to go to college and whatever. So a couple years later, I ended up moving in with my mother and my stepfather. And they lived in a town south of Buffalo. And through talking to my mom, long story short, I ended up getting what's called life repair auditing, which is introductory auditing. It's very specific to what's ruining a person in their life, and it very quickly addresses that. It's supposed to be very light level auditing, but I got to tell you that that really changed me a lot. That really changed me a lot. I mean, to the point where I went back to Rochester afterwards, and I saw one of my best friends, and he saw me coming. He lived up on the 2nd floor, and he's coming down the stairs to the entrance to his apartment building, and he saw me, and he stopped, and he was like, "Oh my God," because you're smiling. I've known you for years, Jeff. I don't think I've ever seen you just smile for no reason. And that really made an impression on me. That auditing made a real impression on me. And within about 4 or 5 months, I was in. I joined staff. I joined staff in March of 1994. As I said in the last video, I got involved right after the war is over. Watched that video, had absolutely no understanding of what was being talked about, but it was still kind of cool. Dave Miscavige was a pretty cool guy, from what I can see. Time goes on. I ended up joining staff. My wife at the time, well, actually girlfriend at the time, ended up joining staff as well. And we eventually went to Florida, down to Flag, and we were part of the whole Golden Age Tech training. That's going to be a whole other video. In fact, I got to shoot something kind of special ahead for that one. So just very quickly, when I got down to Flag, I again really found myself there. And it's really strange that I'm saying that, but I was 22, 23 years old, and I really had no direction with my life. I had no idea what I was going to do. I went to college for 2 semesters, 3 semesters, maybe. I didn't do very well. I just didn't know what I was going to do, and I found something that really I could get into. I loved the schedule. I loved the discipline of the schedule, and I loved the discipline of, you got to be here and here and here. This is when you do this. This is when you do that. And it was like, for the first time, I actually had some structure in my life, and that's hard to come by sometimes. And it really kind of opened my eyes, and I was really impressed with what I learned there. Got through my training. My wife and I at the time were the first ones done with the training for the Golden Age of Tech. I was a supervisor. She was the word clearer. But because we didn't have the full complement of the team, which was supposed to be 2 supervisors and a course from and a word clearer, we didn't get announced basically. But we got a special. We were able to actually talk to the staff, being the first ones done, and it felt good. It felt good. Again, really came into my own afterwards, because then I was running programs where I actually stepped in for one of the upper level execs and actually helped to run all the internships for all the other trainees, because these were people from every organization all across the world. So there's over 200 supervisors that had to get through, and it didn't matter if they're speaking French, English, Spanish, Italian. I think we had somebody from Japan. It's just all over the world. So that was really exciting, and I left there with my chest puffed out, and we got a lot of acknowledgement and praise from upper management of Scientology, including Dave Miscavige, and it was a very prideful time to come home. And we came home, and it didn't go as well as we expected. But okay, again, that's a whole nother video. So I stayed on as the course room supervisor. We both worked full time, and for the type of organization we were in as a Class 5 org, there's the advantages of some orgs were what's referred to as day and foundation. Day worked basically a 9 to 6 schedule. Foundation worked the 6 to 9:30, 10 o'clock schedule, and they worked the weekends. If you were a foundation or staff member for the day, you were kind of expected to go on course at night, and or on the weekends. Or if you were a foundation schedule, you're expected to come in during the day and go and study. So that's how you get your study time in. We were not that. And actually I don't even know now if there are, or how many there are, but there are very few. I mean, off the top of my head, Los Angeles, New York, I don't even remember. I mean, there's not that many organizations out there that had that schedule. But we came back and we were full time. That's 9 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, Saturday and Sunday. And for a little bit of time, we were able to get a little bit of time off during the weekend, and that was it. And we did that schedule for a very, very long time. It's rough, but we were young, so we could handle it. And we really had a lot of real full head of steam with us both, that we were going to really make a difference with the church, and we didn't, unfortunately. I mean, we got some people recovered, and we took a lot of effort. My wife then and I took a lot of effort to make sure we get people back into Scientology, back in the course, get them trained up as auditors, do what the whole Golden Age Tech thing was supposed to do. And we did that for a while. We did not have a lot of staff. We had a very we had a field that had been around for a long time. We didn't have a whole lot of new people. So we had guys that had been on staff during the 70s and 80s. They had been through they called it the Rever times, but this was also the time when Scientology was really expanding. And we unfortunately were not at that time. So a few years go by. I am concerned at how I'm concerned about the lack of expansion with our church. We have less and less staff members. I do not feel the people that are running my church are running it well, and I felt, being a bit cocky and arrogant, that I could do a better job. So I put a lot of pressure to the people in New York and the management, and I eventually ended up taking over as the executive director, kind of following in my mother's footsteps a little bit. So that post I held on and off now for 6 or 7 years, I think. I think I was a supervisor for about 4 years, 3 or 4 years, and then the rest of I think, so it was 11 years altogether, so probably 6 years. 7 years I was the executive director, or other posts below that, based on things I'll tell you soon. We'll get to that, basically. So things were going okay. It was tough. There was only, again, by the time I took over the organization, there really was only a few staff members. We had some really silly postings that were being done, like positions that we just didn't have enough staff to support needing these particular people. So there was a lot of infighting about that. There was a lot of me putting pressure on my management terminals in New York about, getting these people put on different posts. I mean, this is ridiculous. I have no one to bring new people in, but yet I have somebody who has an executive position that is supposed to help organize the organization, but there's no one to organize. It's just weird. Everyone had their little programs that they had to do, but no one ever really seemed to pay any attention to what Buffalo needed. So in that sense, it was tough, but at the same time, we pushed through it, and uh, things started to change. Why they changed was a little strange. And this is another one of those things I'm going to do another video about, but very, very briefly. This is the beginning of the ideal org scene. Buffalo owned its building. One of the few churches that actually, Class 5 churches that actually owned its own building. The problem was the building was old. It had no furnace, and we live in Buffalo. It's cold. We had no furnace. Actually, that building had a boiler. Luckily, the first floor and the second floor both had centralized heating based on the areas. The course room had heating. The auditing room areas had heating, and then we had space heaters that heated up the other areas. The first floor was totally heated, and so it wasn't freezing all the time, but it could be uncomfortable. And if we didn't have the money to pay the heat, it got cold, and we got to really strange solutions for things. So luckily, that only happened once when I was running the church. So so we get a letter from the city saying that they want to buy our building. It's like, why do you want to buy our building? And I'm a little nervous about this. Like, I don't really know how to handle this. I don't have anyone else around to work with me on this. So I'm reaching to my terminals in New York, and guess what just happened 2 months ago? Yep, 9/11. And they were very busy with the Volunteer Ministers Program and the Ground Zero site. So this went unheard for months. The city of Buffalo is trying to buy my building, and I can't talk to anyone about this. So finally I called, because the city's like, well, we made an offer, so what are you going to do? And I got somebody on the phone after an aggressive tone that I've been known for. I got somebody on the phone, and in a good way, the shit hit the fan at that point. So things got going. This news went up. Well, not unfortunately. I mean, actually, fortunately, because a lot of good happened from this. But this went up all the way up to RTC lines, up to David Miscavige's lines. And from what he told me, the Ideal Org program started as, and what got started really was that Buffalo was the pilot for it. I can't necessarily say the Ideal Org scene really started, but we definitely were the catapults for that. Okay, so we're getting a lot of now. Okay, so now a mission from the Scientology executive strata or the management strata. A mission is a group of Sea Org members that would come into a church with a very specific purpose and a program to get a certain thing done. Obviously, with this going on, I needed legal backup. I needed someone from the estates management office, some PR people. So it was busy in the church for a little while, and we again, long story short, I'm going to do a whole video on this particular subject. We ended up by finding a building, selling the building, moved into a temporary location, and just started doing the Rose project on the new building. It's right in the middle there, though, when that was all going on, that something clicked. Something started not making sense to me about the attitude I was getting, because I actually had a lot of respect from my management team in New York, in the continental level. I had a lot of friends up there. I would think I was not perfect, but at the same time, I worked my butt off, and I felt that my seniors respected me for what I did. And where things really started to, where that flow from management started to really change was one of the missions that came in. At the time, it was myself, a supervisor, and somebody in the coverage communications offices where personnel direction is done. This is where ethics is taken care of from. So it's somebody in there as well. And I think there was just 3 of us full time, and we lived together. And we literally would, because we had about a 15-minute drive, we would talk about what was going on for the day. And we literally had our meeting in the car. So we get there, and there is a mission there, and I meet this person, and he said to me, his first thing out of his mouth is, "Why didn't you have mustard this morning?" And I kind of jokingly, but very seriously, said, "Well, we actually had it in the car because we all live together. I mean, there's just three of us, and well, that's not what policy says to do." I'm like, okay, there's 3 of us, and we all live together. We were driving in the same car, and just that attitude I got was the first time I had gotten something like that. And maybe what I said wasn't necessarily correct, but at the same time, something just triggered at that point. So, of all the missions that I had been involved in, that was probably one of the most difficult to deal with this particular person. From there, the org started getting built up. I think we hired another 15 to 20 new staff members, and we were still working out moving to our temporary space and getting the building settled. So things were starting to look really good. We gotten some senior people out in the field back in as staff members that had been staff in the 70s. And something I'm not going to get into very detailed, and we'll never do a video about. I ended up losing 2 of my staff members. 2 of them had died. And it was within a 6-week period that this had happened. And one of which I was extremely close with, and the other one I was very close with. And it was, I've never really broken down if it was after that I started losing my faith, if you want to call it that. It's what happened after my second friend passed away, and the mission that came in at that point, which was one person, and his job was to find the suppressive person in our environment that allowed or caused this to happen. Obviously, you have a potential trouble source. Somebody who's connected to what's referred to as a suppressive person, someone who's basically, think of a good person and the exact opposite is a suppressive person. The antithesis of a good person would be a suppressive person. And to have this to have these 2 types of things around have happened so quickly that it was obvious to them that there was a suppressive in our environment. So this person was brought in. His name was Dan Brown. Again, I mentioned in the video, I'm going to mention a few certain people, a few certain names. I'm not going to point the finger at everyone and say it's his fault and it's management's fault and it's David Miscavige's fault and blah, 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 blah. No, there's a certain few people that followed orders did what they were supposed to do, did instinctively what they thought they were supposed to do, and here we are right now. He was the cream of the crop when it came to doing investigations like this. He was the star. He was the guy that came down. And this is when ethics started becoming more important than everything else. My understanding and my experience with Scientology is that man is aberrated, that he can't follow a straight line, that he's not always good, but his intentions overall is that man is basically good, and that he has his reactive mind, and he's got things that he's done, transgressions in the past, and these are things that are, you're going to fix with auditing. You fix a person with auditing. You don't fix it with ethics. And this guy's solution to everything was, well, let's sit down and do an interview and find out your out of ethics. How far is that going to go? So his thing was that he's going to interrogate he's going to interrogate everyone. There was a certain list of people that were very outpointy, and they had to be looked into. And then I started sitting back and looking around, going, I did all this training with the Golden Age of Tech, and I really busted my ass when I came home. And I really been working hard all these years. And we're supposed to put standard tech, because you put in standard technology, which basically means you're doing exactly what LRH says. And we did all this training, and we're doing what he says, but nothing's changing. I don't think I made 2 auditors in 4 years, because there was no one to train. There's no someone bringing new public in to do public services with them to get to the point to where they would start moving up the bridge. That just didn't happen. And I really started to sit back and think. And then we got into the whole moving into the buildings. We moved to our temporary space, and then we're doing renovations projects after being on post from 8:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and then we all had to put an extra hour and a half in. Some nights I was up until 2 in the morning for weeks at a time. But this is what we agreed to do, and this is what we did. We finished a church. We have our new building. We're the second one. San Francisco was the first. So now what had happened in here was I started getting sick quite often. I would get these really, really nasty fevers. And I wasn't doing, I just wasn't doing well. I was exhausted. And I got brought in one day, and I got told, while I was sick, I got told that I was being removed from post. There's policy on how you're supposed to do this, and just telling somebody you're being removed from post is not how you're supposed to do it. It's not how it works. There's gradients of ethics, of how ethics are being applied. There are certain things you have to do. You just don't go, well, I'm a missionary, you're off post, sorry. That's not how things go. Well, apparently to them it did. Okay, so I get removed. What ended up happening is we had what's called the garrison mission. Garrison mission is Sea Org members coming in to take on the positions of Class 5 staff members as Sea Org members. They're supposed to come in and take over positions while the org gets built up, training their replacements, which was pretty cool. Okay. So I started getting trained I got removed as the executive director and got put on as we'll just say one of the upper management within. I'm not going to get into the different postings and that sort of thing, but I started getting trained for that position. They brought in a new executive director after the garrison mission. That was kind of like the end of the garrison mission, is they found a new executive director. We were trained for our positions. They left. Our new executive director lasted about 5 weeks, had a major scene with his ex-wife. I get put back on as temporary executive director. Another mission comes in, another mission comes in, another mission. I go to New York. So the final trip to going to New York, we'll just go to that. I was sitting, and this name I'm not going to mention. I was sitting with somebody who worked under chairman of the board, RTC. And I was sitting in the New York organization. They had just finished their renovations, finished their building. Beautiful building. Total Art Deco. work. It just, it, God, it was a shame never seeing that place busy. It really was spooky. It's such a beautiful place. And we have, we in Buffalo had a great building, but this was phenomenal. So I'm sitting in one of the public areas, literally in earshot of the front door where new people are coming in. And one of these senior executives is talking about one of the public. And I don't want to use profanity in these videos, but she called her a cunt. And I just looked at her like, what? Did you just really say that? And she's like, what? Are you offended by me saying that word? And I'm like, no, I'm offended the fact that you just talked about another person like that. She's not even here to defend herself. Why did you get so sensitive? And I was just like, wow. I mean, really? So that happens. I think I was on post for about 6 months, 7 months. I got called to the Continental office in New York, our management office, and I was kind of told, they sat me down and said, look, Jeff, you need a breather. We want you to stay here for a little while, finish up the course you're on. We want you to do this other course. And then if you want to train as an auditor while you're here, you want to stay here as long as you want to stay here, stay here. I happen to really like it there as well. I had a place to stay right around the corner. I didn't really have any money, but I cleaned their apartment very thoroughly on a weekly basis. Took care of errands for them when I had the time to do it. So I had my exchange was in with them. Okay, so that goes really well. I'm getting anxious to get home. I request that I get removed from my position and put down as the director of training, which basically puts me back in the course room. I'm running the course room now. I have another supervisor coming back from Flag soon. Things are going to be great. And so I'm on my way, just about to leave, and I hear someone from one of the staff members in the New York org, not the management office, but the New York org mentioned something about another mission firing in, like it's going to be a really big mission firing in. I'm like, okay, I shouldn't know that, and you shouldn't know that, but okay. I get home, and within a week, we had this enormous mission come in. Now, I forgot to say this. Part of my going to New York was I was supposed to get a handling with my scene with my sister, who's hated me being in Scientology, and my mother, who had left. But not in a bad way. She wasn't disaffected as they would call it. She just was done, but didn't cause any trouble. His sister, on the other hand, had been a sore subject for me as far as being a Scientologist, because I have this person who's rabid towards Scientology. So I kind of was one of the other reasons why I went there to New York as well for this. I think it was 2 or 3, maybe 4 months I was there. So I decided I want to go back. I'm done. We got this handling. Everything's worked out. Everything's smoothed out with my sister. Everyone's good. It's all kosher. Everything's good. Mission fires in, and they just happened to be in when I'm talking, because we're at the our weekly staff meeting, which was on Thursday night. We had seen some expansion go in the course room. It wasn't thousands of people. It wasn't hundreds of people. But we'd gotten, let's say, 5 people back on course. And I mentioned this. The mission IC, Dan Brown again, he is in charge of the entire mission. I think there was something like 15 people, 18 people. Doesn't matter. A lot of people. But it's basically going to be somebody over every section of the organization. A new executive director who was a Sea Org member. And really is going to really get things straightened out. So I just finished this program in New York. I'm doing really well. I feel things are going very well. And then one of the people that's there from the mission was actually one of the staff members from the Continental office, or from the management office in New York. And she was very well, she had a lot of knowledge about what I had been doing there and why I was in New York. In fact, I talked to her on several different occasions. Well, they wanted to do an interview with me to find out what's going on. And it wasn't a very friendly interview. It was a very accusative interview. Again, we're using ethics to straighten out everything in a person's life. Well, I'm sorry, but there's only so many times that you can find out what somebody's doing wrong without actually fully clearing up what it is that they're doing. Sorry about that. My screen just went dead. So this, as a person, was very invalidating. That I had just gone through this whole program, and now I'm being like um, very heavily quizzed and in a very not very friendly tone about what I just had just finished. This whole program. I mean, these things get written up. I'm the executive director of this church, and you know, people keep notes about what's going on. And the next day, I had 102 fever. I all of a sudden got this horrible sinus infection, like horrible sinus infection, and I am down for the count for a week. And I had never, ever, 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 ever been that sick. In fact, I basically, and just, having to go through all this time, spending this time in New York, being away from my family, and then having someone question me about what it is that happened. And it just really felt like someone just stuck a knife in my stomach and said, "You're a piece of crap." I mean, I put a lot of time and a lot of effort into getting Scientology to expand and getting Buffalo to expand. And obviously, with the help of the C word, Buffalo did expand. I mean, we went from 3 staff members, 3, to by that point, we had about 35 or 40 staff members. We had 4 auditors in the chair. We had 2 courtroom supervisors. We had a very active ability to bring new people into the church. We were in a very dead neighborhood, meaning there was little to no foot traffic, but things were really starting to turn around. And to be treated like that was really hard to take. I'm sure you can understand that. And then you take the years of not sleeping and no time off, and things just did not look good. So a couple of weeks go by. I get better. I'm still not feeling all that great, and then I get um, I get pulled into a room with one of the missionaries who's over my area, and then Dan Brown. And they sit down and say to me, "We've been investigating the church. We've been investigating what's been going on here for the last 10, 15 years. And we've decided that," or I'm speaking as Dan Brown. He says to me basically that we've discovered that you're the why. Now, what does that mean? That means that they basically think I'm a suppressive person, that I'm the reason why the church is not doing well, that I'm the one who's making everything that management wants to have happen. And for someone as dedicated and as hard as I worked, hearing something like that was basically like being punched in the stomach and thrown down the mountain. And that was hard to deal with. Very, very. I mean, and plus at this point, I'm just like, okay, what's going on here? I tried to talk to my wife about it, and it was just like, she was dumbfounded. She didn't believe me, or she did, or she didn't want to believe me. And plus, she had her own stuff going on with her area as well. So then all of a sudden, and again, I'm not going to get fully into the subject, my sister decides to go on TV about Scientology on 48 Hours. It's just so weird that this, out of nowhere, after being in New York, getting things straightened out with my sister, then all of a sudden now my sister wants to be in front of the television camera for 48 hours. The TV show. So she ends up going on the show. A whole team gets sent from the Office of Special Affairs to deal with this problem now. I get told that I'm what's called PTS type C. There's A to E, A to F of the different types of PTSness. Type C is somebody who is actively connected to somebody who's against Scientology. Problem with this is that this would have affected me, my wife, and by the way, my father-in-law was on staff too. So all 3 of us should have been declared. But because my wife is so valuable to the technical part of the church, they decided not to declare her. They declared myself and my father-in-law. Okay, so now it's starting to get into. Now it's really starting to blend into me. And by the way, they released me from staff a day before my contract was up. They could have just waited a day and just let me go. But no, they had to do it. They had to be a little more dramatic. So to save face, I came up with an idea. I'm like, well, why don't I just go back to New York? Why don't, and this is going to sound really silly, but to me it made sense. And to my wife it made sense. I was like, why don't I go back to New York? You and I file for divorce. Stay connected. Get the situation straightened out with my sister. I didn't want to disconnect from her because then I'd have to disconnect from my mother, which is it's just asinine to do that. But I could straighten out my sister. I could take the time to do it too if I need to. If I need to go down to Florida for a little while where she lived, I would do that and straighten her out. I come back, my wife and I get back together. No, not a good idea. Long story short, a month later, we had this great idea. We're sending you to New York. You're going to get divorced from your wife. And it was our idea. So, like, okay. So now I'm pretty much you can probably tell, at the boiling point at this point. And I get to New York, and I'm supposed to be working with the COO, Tim Loomis, or Lomas, excuse me. I'm supposed to be working with him. They start treating me still like a staff member, and I'm like, no, I'm a public now, which I've never really been in Scientology, actually. I think I was a public for about 5 months my entire time as a Scientologist. So most of my experience as a Scientologist was as a staff member. So we get to kind of the end of the story now. My wife and I end up filing for divorce. I keep checking in with Tim every week. He's like, well, we don't have a program yet. We don't have a program yet. It's 4 or 5 months now. I'm like, all right, I got to figure out what the hell I'm going to do now. I get a job I start working as a handyman. While I'm doing that, I'm making money. I get my real estate license. I start working in real estate. I was living out in New Jersey with my mom, who actually was living in New Jersey at this particular time, which was very helpful. I then ended up getting an apartment in New York, which they kept pushing a lot of pressure on me. Get an apartment in New York. We need you to be around here. I finally do. Right after my wife and I split up, I get called in for one of the events in New York, org, for the Maiden Voyage event. The person who called me right back and said, I'm sorry, you can't come to the event. I was just told by the Department of Special Affairs that you can't come back into the org. And he hung up. Okay. So about 2 weeks later, my now ex-wife calls me, because kind of our plan was that we would stay in touch with each other. We would just, I guess, separate enough to make it look like everything was good, but we would still be able to be connected with each other. She calls me and says that she basically cannot be with me anymore. She can't talk to me anymore, excuse me, and that she has to disconnect. And I was livid. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is not what our deal was. This is not the deal we made with everyone else either, that we would do this as a good gesture, that we would be able to work things out, but here was our plan on how to do it. And we're trying to be sane about this and not have to break up a family to do this. We're only divorced on paper. What's the big deal? Nope. So I asked her, well, who told you this? Who said this to you? I can't tell you that. And it just went away. I'm done. This is ridiculous. You don't break up families? My ass. You don't break up families. And this is the only time I'm going to be really angry about anything. I'm not even really that angry right now. But, I mean, this is the only time I'm going to be this kind of distressed about something. Because it was just ridiculous. Though, a month later, she did call me back, and she apologized. And she said that that's not how we should have handled it. I never did ask her if we really could be in touch with each other. And in fact, I've actually, through Facebook, been able to, before I got remarried, I had to, was going to go through an annulment to be able to get married in the Catholic Church. Part of that was I need some information from her. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we've still been able, we've had some little bit of a connection, but that was it. And, it really started with, this constant, like, pushing of ethics and everything. Like everything that's wrong with everyone and everything is ethics. And it's like we're not using the tech. There's three techs. There's admin, tech, and ethics. And put one in, you have the other. If the other one's not in, the other's out. And it's just how it all works. And no, it's all ethics. It's all, let's do an interview on somebody and like let's get them to tell you what's wrong, but not clean it up thoroughly and get to the bottom of what's going on. So you're kind of like leaving somebody there like hanging. you're just hanging. And theoretically with Scientology, their case is just going to get more and more entangled, and it's just more and more confusion, and that's it. That's what happened. And what I said before in the beginning, in my first video, the intro video, which I'm going to always try to do, is I'm going to tell you kind of, I guess, the story of what happened, and then now life after Scientology, my clarity after Scientology. I learned a lot. I really learned a lot. I have an immense work ethic that I've been complimented on so many times. I try to live my life as honest and as straight as possible. Communication is the universal solvent still to me. You can always work things out with communication. And, a lot of what I've seen in Scientology that I thought should be workable in the, the world, it isn't, because not all of it's going to work. It works well when it's a bunch of people agreeing that that's how things are supposed to work. But I do try to use policy as much as I possibly can at work to straighten things out, and I get a lot of compliments of how calm I am and how I can see what's going on and I can discover what's happening. And just, I love people, and I love talking to people, and love being fair to people, and love giving people a chance. And, you can still use a lot of what you learned, but you have to realize that they're not the universal solvents. There are other points of views, and Scientology really, after, a while of me looking at the rest of the world, it really does come from 10,000 years of culture. There are things that, you can use, really use, and there's some things that are going to frustrate you, but you just have to realize that you don't have, if you look at the ARC triangle, you don't have that reality and the ability to communicate like you do with other Scientologists, so you can't always expect everything to go the way you want. But again, I've learned to just be the best person I can be. And that is all tonight. Thank you. Oh, I should probably point out that you can subscribe. I'm looking at the screen. I think the subscribe button is going to be over here. I think so. Maybe over here. Subscribe. Leave a comment. I will get back to people. I'm very good about that. And we'll take it from there. I'm going to try not to do very long videos like this, but this was kind of, I think, a good introduction to who I am as well. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.